So a few days ago, Keir Starmer was on LBC and Nick Ferrari asked him, what is working class? And his answer is so cringeworthy, but you've got to give it a watch.
You describe yourself as working class. Sakir, define working class.
No, working class is families that work for their living, earn their money through going out to work every day, not through other
Not
means.
middle classes do that?
Well, working class families have the ordinary hope to get on in life. I mean, this has been
Don't
a story.
middle classes have that
Yeah,
as
of course they do. Of course they do.
So what's
But
the distinction?
People will say to me, "Well, look here. You've come a long way.
Yeah. But you went
how
to
you
state
got-"
school.
Yeah, but that is the ordinary hope of the working class, which is to have a decent education, to get a decent secure job, to get a car, to get have a nice holiday, to have a
Isn't
house.
that the middle class too, Sakir? Everything you just listed? No?
It is, yeah, it is, and that's why many people go on their life journey from what you might call working class to middle class.
What? Ordinary hope. What does that mean? He's not an orator. This is what people need to understand about Keir Starmer, is that he's enjoying his poll leads and he's going to be the next Prime Minister purely because he's had quite an easy ride in the media and also because the Tories have completely collapsed. But there's nothing particularly smart about Starmer. He doesn't really grasp a lot. I don't think he has much political analysis on many things. He really doesn't believe in anything, but he hasn't got a clue, has he? So according to Keir Starmer, working class is someone who goes out to work every day, but also wants a car, maybe a holiday. And then Nick Ferrari, who I don't like him at all, but he correctly pointed out that what is the difference between that and middle class? And Keir Starmer couldn't answer that. Now, Starmer says he came from a working class background. We've heard it all the time. His dad was a toolmaker. He grew up in a Pebble Dash house, whatever. But you can be working class and still not grasp what it is to be working class. Now, we can have experience as a working class person. What is the analysis of working class? The definition really is your relationship to the means of production. So that means your income essentially is your only way of surviving your wage. You live on your wage. You have no other assets or other forms of income. Now, that can be as true for middle class people. And I think that many people try to make this big distinction between working class and middle class, but the distinction it isn't actually that big. For me, as a socialist, I'm more interested in the distinction between the 1% and the 99%. There is a distinction between a working class person and a middle class person, and that is assets. So once upon a time, a working class person or a family could afford to get a house realistically. It was the norm. 70% of British people, or 70% of Britain, were homeowners. Now, that's one asset which working class people could get. But if you're middle class, you may have multiple assets. That's the distinction. Another distinction is that if you were to lose your job as a middle class person, you do have a bit of money to keep you going for a while. Whereas a working class person, especially today, lives paycheck to paycheck. But even still, looking at the distinction between the middle class and the working class, I don't think is particularly helpful. Really, in reality, the actual distinction we have is workers and the owner class. All of the problems people face as a working class person, they face the same issues as a middle class person. Sure, there's a scale, right? You've got the working poor, you've got poverty, you've got the working poor, working class and middle class, right? But at the end of the day, they don't have power in how the economy is run. They don't have a say, they don't choose the rules, but it's the owner class, it's the CEOs, it's those that own the means of production. Because if you own the means of production, you are drawing an income of other people's work. Now, within that, you do have the petty bourgeoisie, which is small businesses and small business owners. Of course, they are drawing an income from other people's work, but that's what we call it, the petty bourgeoisie, because they're not exactly working class. But given the fact that if you're a small business owner, a lot of time, for a very long time, you won't be drawing a profit whatsoever. You could be losing money. So you're hardly in the same bracket as someone who was in the top 1%. Now, 150 years ago, that didn't really exist. You didn't really have much of a middle class. Even before, in the feudalist times, we had the peasants, and then you had the merchants, the landowners, and the kings and queens, right? Now, through the development of capitalism and in the Industrial Revolution, what we saw is a more of a scale between those at the bottom and those at the top. So it's no longer to say the have and have nots, or the 99% versus the 1%. is an oversimplification in a way. It's a bit less black and white, more of a grey area, because and this is also through Thatcher's revolution and neoliberalism, you do have the rise of the small entrepreneur and the small business owners. Now, I really like this question, what it is to be working class, or what is working class? And I think every politician should answer that question, because especially in the Labour Party today, they masquerade as supporting the working class because they used to come from working class backgrounds. But it doesn't really matter. Wes Streeting came from a working class background and now he's hell-bent on privatising the NHS. Keir Starmer came from a working class background, so he says, and now he's supporting policies that don't help the working class. He's turned his back on unions and workers. Take someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who came from a middle class background, yet his policies were far better for the working class. Labour have co-opted multiple stories about their backgrounds and the story they want to tell, but it's meaningless. It's meaningless if you don't have the policies to support the working class, and it's meaningless if you don't have the correct analysis of what it is to be working class. And I think without asking this question of our politicians, it allows people, even like Nigel Farage, to get away with it. Millions of people think that Nigel Farage represents the working class. Why? Because they think, well, he goes to the pub and pulls a pint and he says a few things he's not really supposed to say. That means he's working class. Well, he's an ex-city banker, an ex-Tory, who's never known what it's like to be working class. Without asking the question, the material analysis of what it is to be working class, we get phonies who pretend to represent the working class when they don't. If you ask your average person what it is to be working class, you're going to get so many different answers, but commonly you'll get answers based around culture. People might say working class is someone who wears certain types of clothes, does certain activities, goes to certain places, as opposed to a middle class person might wear or shop in these brands, and when they go out to socialise, they go to these sorts of places. This is an incorrect definition to find out what it is to be of a socio-economic class. Some people might say, well, working class people go to the pub, you know, they're a bit racist, this stupid character that media's concocted of what it is to be working class. And middle class are a bit more prim and proper and they wear nicer clothes. Again, that's a terrible distinction or a terrible definition because it's just not true. There are many people who, on the surface, might look and sound working class, but their socio-economic circumstance is of someone who's actually middle class, and vice versa. It's when you get, I would say, the sort of blue Labour types, the Paul Embry types, who thinks that a working class person is someone who smokes and drinks a lot, and that's about it. And it's the young middle class people who eat avocado on toast. They don't understand. It's really weird, this cultural phenomenon that we seem to put into categories of what class is. Again, ignore that. That is not the case. Now, I don't expect Keir Starmer or many politicians to start pulling out capital and basic Marxist talking points, but I think you should have a basic grasp of what it is. So if I was Keir Starmer, I would say working class is you rely on your wage to survive, and that is it. You've got no assets. Middle class people are the exact same, have a few more assets. But then I would go on to say, but I'm more interested in talking about the inequality from those in the top 1% and the rest of us. We need to understand that the Labour Party is a party of the working class. It came from the working class. But in 2023, the Labour Party can't and shouldn't just represent the working class. It should represent the middle class too. That's how you, one, get into power, but two, how you can really understand what the real divide is. There are so many people who are struggling, especially today, especially with mortgages going up, the cost of living crisis going up, all these things that working class people are struggling with. So are middle class people, but those who are the captains of industry aren't. But it was a really embarrassing answer because one, he couldn't say anything of substance, and two, he's not even a very good bullshitter. He doesn't really think off the cuff that well. Now, most of his questions in the media are quite softball. They're quite easy. And I would argue he's had an easy time in the media, but as soon as you get a question like that, and he doesn't really know how to answer, he sounds terrible. You know, people like to compare him to Tony Blair. And I mean, similar in their politics, but in terms of being an orator, at least Tony Blair could put together a sentence that was coherent. And he sounded charismatic because he was charismatic. Keir Starmer is not charismatic. But that's besides the point. What really matters is we have politicians in power who don't have a basic structural analysis. And because they don't have a basic structural analysis, they won't have the policies to really fix the country and fix the economic system we live in, and to really radically change and redistribute wealth and power to help out the working class. Because if you don't know what it is to be working class, how are you going to help them? So I thought that was really important. I mean, yes, it is funny to watch Keir Starmer look and sound like a twat, but the deeper point here is that most of our, like overwhelmingly, most of our MPs don't understand what it is to be working class. Unless you have an actual analysis of it, then it's meaningless.